Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the show, USAPrepares.com. And this is Rich Scheben from Montana sitting in for Vincent Finelli while he prepares for winter and catches up on some farming, which we all have to do now and then. So I'm going to be interviewing Dr. Norm Shealy today. Dr. Shealy, are you in?
I am here. Good morning.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I am great, thank you. Hope the same for you.
Oh, yeah. It's been a very productive hunting season. It's been a good fall so far. And as we're heading into the final run of election fury, things are getting pretty crazy out there, huh?
They've been crazy all year, actually. The craziest year of my life.
Yeah. It's definitely over the top with what's going on these days, and the hypocrisies and double standards that are out there for certain people versus the rest of us is it's truly not just unpredictable and unbelievable. I don't think a Twilight Zone episode writer could have written what's happening today. So
I agree. It is totally made up evil empire at work.
Absolutely. And Dr. Shealy, I want to thank you, by the way, and I'm sure Vince has done this. I want to thank you for your service to the American people, for being a physician and educating people free of charge with information that really makes a difference to their lives. I want to personally thank you from USAPrepares.com and myself and Vince Finelli. We really appreciate volunteers like yourself who put the American people first over your personal paycheck, over your, you often say things that some people don't want to hear. And if we don't have the guts to say the truth anymore, then America's done.
Well, that is true. And, of course, we only have one purpose in life, to help other people. And, of course, you, by doing this program, help other people, and I contribute to that. But the people who do something productive, whether it's building a barn or building a gun or building a highway, etc., all of it is stuff to help other people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, speaking of helping other people, we try to bring out a lot of false information. And since I've got you on the air right now, Dr. Shealy, and your website is normshealy.com, is that correct?
That is correct, although it also goes into one for our clinic, which is realholisticdoc.com. But either one of those will get to my website.
Okay. All right, Dr. Shealy. Well, I'm going to start out with something that broke over the past 3-4 days. And I'm sure you probably have read about this or seen the video, but an international group of medical doctors called COVID-19 a hoax. Now, what they were referring to, I want to read a few excerpts before I get your comment. Basically, in footage released, here we go. I want to say that I'm just trying to get some key excerpts here. I want to say that we do not have a medical pandemic or epidemic, explains Netherlands general practitioner Dr. Elke de Klerk in a short excerpt from the meeting. We also state that COVID-19 should not be on List A for any longer because now we know that it is a normal flu virus, and a normal flu virus isn't on List A. And they go on to state that there is no pandemic, and they're wondering why kids should be in schools. There's no reason for panic. Also, in the medical practice, there is no reason for panic. Assures Dr. DeClercq, the panic is created by false positive PCR tests at 89 to 94% are false positive. And I'm just going through the article here, picking out certain important excerpts. We have no evidence of medical pandemic. It just looks like a plandemic. Now, over the past several months when I've been on the air, I try to combine, Dr. Shealy, financial, economic, social, and political rationale. And I talk a lot about political correctness. I talk about how a lot of the information war is basically hoaxes or propaganda or false flags or lies, especially gaslighting, to promote whatever the approved narrative would be. Now, that being said, if this really is a plandemic, not just on the American people, but on the people of the world, of the free world. Now, I've given so much information about the correlation between fear that's manufactured through perception with the COVID, with masks, and compromising people's immune systems. I've given so much information, the whole alternative media has, of tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars for positive diagnosis and payouts to hospitals and whoever, and tying in Soros and Gates and Fauci, even the CDC, the NIH, and the World Health Organization, promoting fraud, profiteering, and even patents, and the funding with compromised bankers, intelligence communities, abuse of corporate and state powers for a paycheck and control, and basically being a cover-up by big tech where they have no antitrust authorities left anymore in this country. And these big tech controllers and gatekeepers of all the proposed narratives, from e-commerce to any propaganda or hoax, in order to control the people. So regarding what I just said, Dr. Shealy, and this international group of medical doctors calling COVID-19 a hoax or a plandemic, we have to admit that this is very disturbing. This shows that we have so much corruption at the very top of so-called official authorities. And I think this is adding to that correlation of fear and a compromising immune system. What do you say about that, Dr. Shealy?
I've been calling it a fraud since the beginning in March. It is absolute, unabashed nonsense. Now, I believe that the Committee of 300, the Bilderberg, the Tavistock, all of that illegal 300-year-old take over the world evil empire is at the core of this. That's just my belief.
Well, I don't think anybody who's well-read and researched, Dr. Shealy, would disagree with that at all. We've had so much proof here on USAPrepares.com and the alternative media that the agenda behind COVID-19 is probably 99% of everything. And even though this is a real virus, the virus is probably 1% of what's happening. And I've mentioned in great detail and specificity about the agenda, from forced austerity, crashing the economy, eliminating free markets and supply and demand, getting rid of cash, starving the people, depopulation, eliminating free speech. but forced vaccines to lower our immune system for immunity passports. And there's about 25, 30 points on the agenda that I've discussed since March about all this.
Right.
Making us submissive, breaking our will. You know, when they talk about immunity passports and what happens when you take forced vaccines, it's quite, let's talk about that for a moment. You know, just vaccines in general. You know, when you look at how even the CDC has admitted years ago that most contain mercury, MSG, formaldehyde, aluminum, a lot of potent neurotoxic chemicals and heavy metals. You know, when you're talking about neurotoxins, you're talking about changing people's, possibly their DNA, their RNA, and risking a lot of diseases, you know, like an Alzheimer's or basically any type of central nervous system disorder. You're talking about where it could change, you know, a lot of these viruses, they adapt, they mutate, and, you know, even when you take a flu shot, it's a guessing game. And, you know, you talk about, there's so many central nervous systems disorders that have been attributed to vaccines. Some even have admittedly said they contain antibiotics. You know, when I worked for Big Pharma, which obviously turned out to be a big mistake, but that's why they hire you in your 20s and 30s when you're young and dumb. You know, people back in I remember the 80s and 90s would get a sniffle and then go to the doctor and get even like a second generation powerful, potent cephalosporin, which destroys your normal flora and reduces your resistance down the road to create some bacterial Frankenstein. And they were talking about that then. And now we even have neonatal deaths increasing by thousands of percent. You know, I have an article here, U.S. media blackout, Italian court rules vaccines cause autism. This was a GlaxoSmithKline product. And there's another article out there that GlaxoSmithKline was paying $63 million to vaccine victims under the table. So we have basically dark money, hidden secret vaccine courts. What's your opinion with everything I just said and the way vaccines are going, especially with the implication of forcing it on the people?
My opinion is to get that vaccine in me, you got to shoot me with a gun first. I agree all the way. It is unethical, irresponsible, illegal, and dangerous. But other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, the play goes on.
What about central nervous system disorders? I mean, there's been a lot of articles I've read over the years that can attribute vaccines to central nervous.
Yeah, especially autism in children.
Now, that's pretty scary stuff. So basically, you would agree with the statement that forcing vaccine on people could be looked at as attempted murder.
I agree, absolutely.
Dr. Shealy, thank you for your honesty. We'll be back after the break, folks. We really appreciate you being here. We'll see you in a few minutes. Welcome back to the show, folks. Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli today. And I am with Dr. Norm Shealy, normshealy.com. And Dr. Shealy, your last name is spelled Shealy. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. That's my only sobriety test for you this morning, just so you know. So I have a couple of articles here, Dr. Shealy, I want to get your opinion on. A Texas doctor who has succumbed to COVID-19 was wearing the same N95 mask. You know, I've read so many people who have so, quote-unquote, got the virus while wearing the mask. I've read so many articles about people who wear the mask, end up being sicker because of the contributions from hypoxia, from creating a humid walking petri dish where bacteria can grow. I've read so many articles where the mask, and even admittedly on the CDC website, where it doesn't stop transmissions of virus because of certain micron sizes of viruses. There's no studies that show if masks work. You have people using T-shirts, people using scarves, people using almost anything out there. And it just shows, especially when you read some of the signs in some parts of the world saying that wear the mask, don't have eye contact with people, walk with your head down. This is obviously part of the totalitarian, tyrannical, communist insurrection takeover that's taking place worldwide by the very few elite with the most money. Tell us about what your opinion is of what I just said, especially about the efficacy and safety of masks.
I don't call it BS because I consider it an insult to the whale. To the bull. So I call it whale masks.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Can you go into more detail about masks and the lack of studies that show as long as you cover your face, you're safe and other people are safe?
Well, in the operating room, where you wear a very specific kind of surgical mask, it helps protect the patient from your particular germs. However, wearing it all day is not good for you. No question about it. And it doesn't really, there's not one scientific study that shows any efficacy in preventing the spread of an epidemic.
You know, think about what you just said, and we've, in the alternative media, we have all read this. That the comment that you just made basically states, and you're a practicing physician, right, Dr. Shealy?
You bet.
And how many years have you been practicing medicine?
64.
Well, can you imagine if people on the left right now would call you non-credible, that you weren't valid, that you were a Russian spy?
I might be a spy for any country except Russia and China. But
yeah. Thank you for that.
But not those.
We're living in such a 1984 Orwellian nightmare that here you know more about medicine, not just by going to school. Your school means almost nothing today. You've been doing it. You've been practicing it. You are not practicing theory. You are practicing practical experience. And when people like you come forth with this kind of information that everybody in the alternative media knows, every patriot who's well-read and researched knows that the masks are not helping. They are designed to make us submissive and to break our will. And if a mask has no efficacy, and all these so-called scientists and doctors and experts are coming out, and they're being purged, they're being edited, their information is being shadow banned, censored. It's unbelievable. It's truly unbelievable that the powers that be are only allowing certain narratives who are being bought and paid for or blackmailed or bribed to be able to speak the bought and paid for narrative. It's unbelievable. Well, Dr. Shealy, I appreciate your honesty. We'll be back with Dr. Norm Shealy after the break. We really appreciate you folks being here. Well, welcome back to the show, folks. Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli, and our guest is Dr. Norm Shealy, normshealy.com. Dr. Shealy, let's just take a cue from our last break. Basically, they were talking about Hunter Biden, Joe Biden. They were talking about, let me just mention some articles here. Proof of Hunter Biden raping and torturing children for Chinese blackmail scheme. Biden did meet with Son's Ukraine partners, even though he said he never spoke to them. That has been declassified. has evidence of Joe Biden's Burisma meeting before impeachment. Biden donor group sends 225,000 ballot requests, including for dead citizens. You can't make this stuff up.
Look, when it comes to Joe Biden
got rich while the Americans got robbed. And, of course, they were talking about on the break, Dr. Shealy, how the FBI knew about this. You know, the FBI, from my reading and research, they knew about these computers, this multiple computers now, from what I understand, regarding the rape and torture of prepubescent girls, and the FBI basically didn't disclose this information. You know, we had the DOJ probe into the Obama White House spying, ends with no charges as per AG Barr. You know, basically, you have all this corruption from the FBI, CIA, you know, Gina Haspel blocking the release of all these declassifications. And here they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars for taxpayer dollars, on taxpayer dollars to impeach Trump for what the Bidens and Hillary and Obama did. You know, it's just so surreal on what's going on, and now the powers that be behind the mainstream media are blaming Russia. Russia did it. I mean, this is such a joke. So when you talk about the lack of trust in the system, from medical tyranny to the DOJ, the FBI, election rigging from Facebook and Twitter, censoring Biden's pay-to-play scandals, you have to admit, when you see the stress, you know, I talked about the correlation earlier between the fear, whether it be COVID, whether it be masks, whether it be election rigging, whether it be pay-to-play, whether it be all these scandals and the blocking of the rule of law. Does that, you know, when you see, Dr. Shealy, when you see all the units of measure of despair going up, obesity, psychotropic drugs, antidepressant drugs, street drugs, alcohol, suicide, and people have all this stress, you know, we see very toxic U.S. farmland with the chemicals and the glyphosate. We see the package inserts, the side effect profile, the adverse events, the contraindications. Asks anybody who has any common sense and logic, why would you want to take these pharmaceutical drugs unless it's an absolute last resort? But when people see all this, Dr. Shealy, can you talk about the correlation between fear, despair, and a compromising immune system?
Well, the single most common cause of all illness is anxiety, leading to depression, clobbering the immune system, and it doesn't matter what you're afraid of or what you're anxious about, it is fear that is the basic cause of almost all problems. No matter how strong your immune system is, it can be broken down by fear. And fear leads to, you know, disease. Now, this is the fear-mongering of the millennium, of the last 5,000 millennium.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have to admit, when you see the lack of nutrition in the foods done on purpose, when you see, you know, pesticides and glyphosate making agriculture toxic today, when you see...
Hey, you know, by the way, I agree with all of those. However, did you realize that even if they didn't go through what we're going through, if we don't get rid of fluoride in the city waters, within 20 years there won't be any more babies. They will wipe out the future of humanity totally. The sperm count of men has decreased from 150 million to 40 million already. When it gets to 20 million, men are infertile. So within 10 to 20 years, if fluoride remains in the water, we won't be here anyway for the future.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've talked about the depopulation events occurring above and behind the scenes many times, and you know, fluoride is a great example. You know, even China labels it as a pesticide. It's often a main ingredient in rat poison. And from my research and reading, it has zero benefits of any kind. It can cause brain lesions and cancer and makes people, like you say, sterile and even docile. So this is one of the reasons why
the original head of the FBI was at best a cross-dresser. So I've never trusted the FBI or the CIA. They've always been bad.
Well, now they're starting to create precedents, not just blocking Republicans and scandals. They're starting to make precedents, the FBI, by, you have to ask, are they taking adult mutual consensual sex off the table by allowing child porn and no indictments and arrests of these people? And big tech is also allowing Chinese government sites and propaganda to occur. So,
all of the above.
Yes, sir. So it is very disconcerting, and we have to obviously accept the fact that our, whether it be intelligence agencies, mainstream media, the Democrat Party, the globalists, Hollywood, basically all the elite, all the millionaires have become one team against the people. And this is why, when I always talk about the delegitimization of work, Dr. Shealy, when people infight and create chaos between what group you're in, and then they demand to lower the bars of standards and expectations for that job, and you eliminate hard work and proven results and qualifications, you take United States of America, where the economy is run on GDP, which is two-thirds consumption, you have eliminated any legitimacy or validity of getting a job when you say you can feel entitled to play the victim group status card based on what group you're in. And then when you continue to demand no protection, rights, or restitution under the rule of law for people who were targeted, you create a precedent on runaway power. There's no checks and balances. And then when you enable and protect the most corrupt companies in the world with liability immunity, you not only create more wealth inequality, but you allow the big companies, along with big corrupt government workers, to basically get free lunch and change the rule of law with precedents. And these are all divide and conquer strategies, and these people are sold out to the highest bidder, and they don't even care about the hypocrisies and double standards and brainwashing that's occurring in plain sight anymore. So, let's go back to vaccines for a minute. Last week when I was on the air, I basically mentioned from one website, naturalnews.com, Mike Adams, a true patriot. I mentioned basically, this is one website, Dr. Shealy, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I'm just going to mention some of the vaccines, since we were talking about that, regarding GlaxoSmithKline. GSK fined less than $100,000 for killing 14 babies during vaccine trials. I want you to think about the fact that we're supposed to give this industry liability immunity. GlaxoSmithKline begins testing experimental Ebola vaccines on West Africans. Yet another failure. Wildly hyped GlaxoSmithKline cancer vaccine fails in clinical trials. GlaxoSmithKline dumps live polio virus into the Belgian rivers used for swimming and fishing. FDA slaps vaccine manufacturer for ongoing bacterial contamination. Vaccine causes autism, says confidential document for corrupt drug company. This is basically a rap sheet. Now, you said you've been in practice for 64 years. This is just a small portion of the rap sheet for GlaxoSmithKline. If you were basically convicted of doing 1/100th of these behaviors, Dr. Shealy, do you think you'd still be in practice for 64 years?
No, but let's face it. The medical schools now are run by the pharmacomafia. 99% of all research conducted at most medical schools is funded by the pharmaceutical mafia.
Well, and that's part of the corporate feudalism, Dr. Shealy. We have no accountability when you consolidate all power, money, and control. It's a feudal system, especially with government assistance. And it's getting, and I think this really adds to a lot of, like you said, the anxiety and the stress of what's happening in America today. But let's say you weren't your age. Let's say you're in your teens and 20s, and maybe early 30s, and you were reading and researching about this information. How do you think you would feel about the future of your life in every aspect, financially, economically, socially, politically, truth-wise, having a different tiered system of rules, laws, and accountability based on what group you're in? How do you, especially when you read articles about 5G radiation, electromagnetic radiation, and what it's doing to people regarding cancer and changing your DNA and just lowering your immune system, how would a young person today who's not getting the true information, and they start reading true information from the alternative media, how do you think they would feel regarding the lack of trust and the hypocrisy and inequality and double standards coming from the elite, allowing themselves to have free lunch, and we got to keep buying from the company store, Dr. Shealy?
Well, I have to admit my greatest concern is my grandchildren, because the future does not look good. The current looks bad, but the future looks worse.
Yeah, I remember years ago reading an article where 96% of Monsanto shareholders voted to not disclose GMO ingredients in their products. That is absolutely an admission to guilt, if you ask me. We'll be back with Dr. Norm Shealy after the break, folks. Hang on. Welcome back to the show, folks. I am sitting here with Dr. Norm Shealy, and we are trying to save the world, right, Dr. Shealy?
That's a big task. I don't think Superman's up to it.
No, I know. But you know what? What we're trying to do is we're just trying to be Americans. We're trying to do our part and try to unveil the shadows and smoke, deceiving the American people with this political correctness of deception and selling narratives to the highest bidder, especially when our own law enforcement agencies at the highest level is promoting child porn, is basically saying that adult mutual consensual sex is off the table, basically allowing election rigging. It's a sad time in America, to say the least. Dr. Shealy, let me ask you something. With you being in practice, a practicing physician, a diagnostician for 64 years, that, by the way, is so impressive I can barely pronounce that in one sentence. In your experience regarding longevity, okay, do you feel that people who live longer take less synthetic drugs or no synthetic drugs versus people who take more?
Do you always answer your own questions?
Yes. Well, I wouldn't mind getting a little more details and specificity from the expert.
No,
even though after some of your comments today, the mainstream media might call you a Russian spy now. But however that being the case, I would like to hear your opinion.
Every week on my radio call-in show here in Springfield, I say, I don't know not a single chronic disease for which I would try any conventional therapy. An acute illness, certain acute illnesses, conventional medicine save your life. But once it becomes chronic, now the official diagnosis of chronic is 6 months or more. I think after 3 months, if it hasn't worked, it's going to kill you. The drug rather than the disease.
You know what, Dr. Shealy? I have to commend you. And we've never met. I don't owe you a favor. You don't owe me a favor. But you can say so much in so few words. It's just impressive. I mean,
Well,
you are so good at it. But if you heard what Dr. Shealy said, if your acute disorder goes to a chronic disorder and you're on pharmaceutical synthetic drugs and it goes beyond 6 months and you're still taking it, your probability of the drugs killing you gets higher than fixing you. Is that a good layperson example, what you just said, Dr. Shealy?
right on.
Awesome. I want to ask you a question, Dr. Shealy. I hear a lot of debates about probiotics, especially after antibiotic use. What is your feeling on that?
Now, there is something I was taught as a junior in medical school. When you give antibiotics, take probiotics. I do believe in probiotics. My favorite is kefir, but plain Greek yogurt is equally good, I think. I just prefer the flavor of plain kefir. But, yeah, we need those, especially in today's world.
And can you repeat the kind of yogurt that you recommend again, please?
Plain Greek, Greek, is better than regular yogurt.
So if it's flavored and not plain, it loses more efficacy?
Right, because you got sugar in it.
Ah.
You don't need any sugar whatsoever. Sugar is the original fake artificial food.
So you would classify sugar as an immune suppressant, correct?
Oh, absolutely. A cancer enhancer.
So basically all artificial sweeteners like MSG and aspartame, nicotine, high fructose corn syrup,
Okay.
they're all designed to be addictive, and there's no pro-safety, pro-efficacy ties to this stuff.
Exactly.
It's amazing to me how they can allow propylene glycol, which is an antifreeze derivative, in certain foods. Isn't that a mind blower?
Well, I just wrote a long article last week on surviving in a toxic world. The amount of toxins that the food industry puts out is unbelievable. The food industry is at least as evil as the tobacco industry. And the dental industry is right behind them.
Now, this is why we need to eliminate any probability of liability immunity for any industry, and that's especially applicable in big pharma or any pharmaceutical and the food industry. We'll be right back after the break, folks. Welcome back, everybody. This is Rich Scheben from Montana sitting in for Vincent Finelli while he catches up on some farming. And I am with Dr. Norm Shealy, normshealy.com. And Dr. Shealy has said some very eloquent pieces of information during the first hour. This is the beginning of hour number 2. And one of the things he mentioned was regarding acute diseases when they go chronic, when you go beyond the 6-month period, those synthetic pharmaceutical drugs lose and basically there's a major efficacy reduction, and it starts to kill you. But Dr. Shealy, I was just thinking of some people who have certain chronic disorders like diabetes, especially, I realize type 2 diabetes can be reversed in the great majority of cases with diet and exercise. But what about people who maybe don't want to do life changes or have type 1 diabetes and they're taking insulin? Or there's people who have had heart disease and had heart surgeries and they have to take anticoagulants for the rest of their life. I mean, are there any exceptions to the acute chronic disease / synthetic pharmaceutical drug going beyond 6 months, which could be necessary? Dr. Shealy.
I don't consider insulin for type 1 diabetics a drug. It's a replacement of a natural substance. There's a great difference. And actually, coronary artery disease is reversible with chelation and several other approaches. So now there is an actual drug, but again, I wouldn't use it chronically. I mean, I might give it for 3 months to clean out the arteries, but I wouldn't give it for life.
Okay, well said. Let's talk about vitamins and minerals. You know, we all know that vitamins and minerals mostly come from the soil, but from chemicals and mechanical stuff and heavy metals, especially around urban suburban areas. We've lost a lot of those essential life functions in our soil today. What would you say to people who want to be self-sufficient, who are reading that, farmland has been contaminated and is getting to be toxic? When people want to be self-sufficient, want to eat healthy, what kind of lifestyle changes would you tell them to do, Dr. Shealy?
Well, first, second, and third, there is no such thing as a non-contaminated soil today. 75% of all the rain that falls in this country has Roundup in it. So, unless you have a greenhouse with filtered air and filtered water, you cannot even call something organic and be truthful. Second, because of the toxicity in our water supply and our air, and by the way, we've only touched on 1% of the total toxicity. There's hundreds of toxic things in the air and water today. I think we must have about 10 times more vitamin B complex than we needed 50 years ago. And although the original recommended daily intake of vitamin C was 60 milligrams, I think less than 2 grams a day of vitamin C is a danger to your health.
Okay. Now, since I mentioned chemicals, which I'm sure we talked about a little bit in the first hour, there's a lot of information coming out recently where exposure to chemicals, not just in food for longevity and shelf life and things like that, but they're used to disinfect offices and furniture and airplanes, and there's ties to birth defects and cancer, even childhood cancer. When I was a kid growing up in the 60s and 70s, it was rare. I mean, you barely heard about cancer, even in adults, never mind children, and now you hear about it almost every day. And it's, what do you tell people? I mean, we talk on USA Prepares all the time about self-sufficiency and moving rural and getting away from urban, suburban areas. And, a lot of people are listening. There's a mass exodus out of a lot of these blue Democrat states to where people want to get that 20 to 40 acres. What do you tell people to do regarding if they want to start gardening and they want to create their own soil and do raised bed gardening and really just get their hands dirty? What advice do you give those people, Dr. Shealy?
Compost. I mean, now you've got to have access to actually lots of plant waste or animal waste to make your compost, but you can find that. I mean, even rotting newspaper might be okay. I don't know. But I live on a farm and have for a vast majority of my entire life, and I do not use any poisons ever.
Yeah, well, it's a good idea. I mean, I call my place a little hobby farm, and I got goats and chickens. So basically all their poop, which is saturated in straw, I throw into the compost pile with basically every radish top, every tomato seed, every eggshell goes into that compost pile. And
exactly.
It's amazing how the black dirt just shows up at the very end of it, and great worms in there, and yeah, it's awesome. Dr. Shealy, with all of our, you were talking about sperm counts. It's not just sperm counts, it's testosterone counts. There's hormone-disrupting chemicals in the airplanes, in the homes, in the offices. You see transgender people, probably a 10-to-1 ratio of males going to females. You see a lot of mental disorders, like I mentioned earlier in the show, where the psychotropic drugs, antidepressive drugs, are record.
And suicide.
And suicide, absolutely. It's quite disturbing. When you're talking to young families, and you mention all this stuff, you talk about antioxidants boosting your immune system function, you talk about, cancers and tumors and immune stimulants and builders and blood purifications, you talk about inflammation, circulation, allergies, infections, detoxification, cancers and tumors, which basically are the 6 major categories that deal with the immune system. When you talk to young people today, and they're very concerned about what's going on. I mean, it's so sad to say, but I know so many people, good, great parents that have had their children commit suicide. And mostly, unfortunately, males, which is 77% of it. And I think a lot of these estrogen mimickers and all these chemicals and hormone-disrupting chemicals, food, water, air, homes, furniture, offices are major contributors. How do you tell people to avoid this stuff? What advice would a 64-year veteran of the medical industry say?
Well, first of all, you couldn't pay me any amount of money to live in a town. Now, if everybody, wanted to live on 5 or 10 acres of land, we might have a real problem. On the other hand, if you've got enough common sense to do it, I think that's where you should live. Now, even if you live in a city, and 80% of people still live in individual homes, by the way, you can have a vegetable garden instead of a lawn. If you've got a lawn, plow it up and plant your own food. I did that when I lived in Cleveland.
So, Dr. Shealy, because of your age and your great experience, when you're talking to somebody who's in that retiree, semi-retiree age, what would you say? I mean, a lot of people feel that it's too scary to start anew when you get to a certain retirement age. And I feel just the opposite. I feel that this lifestyle is rejuvenating. It's skill set building. I have personally had over 1,000 people I've given tours to on my hobby farm regarding off-grid living and gardening and all the things that we do here. And a lot of people benefit from gleaning information that way because they see that there's so much toxicity. I remember talking about horse meat with Taco Bell and Burger King years ago. I talk about red dye in meats. I talk about meat, non-meat grown in a lab, sold in restaurants, sold in grocery stores. The hormones, antibiotics, and steroids, and GMOs, and everything. The nanotechnology, the pesticides-fed cattle, and the grains that they eat today. The cloning of livestock, the modified proteins and enzymes in all of our foods, which affects bioavailability, absorption of nutrients, excretion, metabolism, homeostasis in the body. So as we get older, I'm 60, and we don't absorb nutrients like we should when we were younger. What message would you have to older folks who want to pursue this hobby farm self-sufficiency arena, if you will, when they get, because a lot of people are too scared to pursue it. What's your thoughts?
It's a lot safer than sitting. My daughter says I don't know how to retire, which is true. I have no desire to retire, and probably as long as I'm able to move, I will never retire. But I'll be 88 in December, and I'm planning on going at least another 20 years or more. But I can't imagine just sitting around all day or playing golf. Golf to me has always been what I would call a playboy's game. It's not a game for people who really want to live. And golf courses are among the most poisoned in the world.
You know, what's funny, I was visiting a friend in Florida, and he lives on a golf course. Long story short, big bass in these ponds where he lives. I mean, trophy bass. And basically, everybody around there says if you eat the bass from all the chemicals that they put on the lawns, you'll probably die in 2 hours. Of course, they're being a little facetious, but it really is a big concern today. And I'll tell you my opinion of golf, and everybody's different. I know people who live to ride their motorcycle, live to be in their boat, live to hunt, live to fish this one species. Everybody's different, and that's what makes America great. So I got a little quick golf story when we come back, and we're with Dr. Norm Shealy, but we're right back after this break, folks. We are getting close to the end of the show. We have a little over half an hour left. We really appreciate you being here. And this is Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli with Dr. Norm Shealy. And Dr. Shealy, you mentioned golf right before the last break, and there's a set of humorous postcards, and I can't think of the name. Maybe it's Duck Boy, I don't know. But there's these postcards that here in Montana someone was doing, or somebody in the Rockies. I don't even know where they manufactured them. But it was basically about, this one was about golf. And there was these 3-4 golfers that were on a putting green, and it showed them running, throwing their putters up in the air, screaming, and a grizzly bear was coming out of the woods onto the green. And the title of the card was, "Now Golf is a Sport."
Yes.
I mention it about once a year, and I don't know if they still have that card, but they should print that concept in politics for a lot of reasons too, a lot of context. Hey, Dr. Shealy, I want to ask you, with this COVID, you see hand sanitizers everywhere. What's your opinion on the efficacy and safety of hand sanitizers?
Well, I think they are actually safe for washing your hands, but not putting it in your mouth. Soap is probably better and safer, but alcohol, rubbing alcohol, it does destroy about as much as soap will.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, there's a lot of people today very concerned about going into hospitals because of COVID, because of basically nosocomial infections, secondary infections, things of that nature. What's your opinion of going to a hospital today? Should you make it a last resort? Should it be as open in your mind as it was prior to COVID?
In acute illness, it can save your life. So you don't have a choice with a lot of acute illnesses. But at my age, even with an acute illness, I've given it up. I've made a decision. I do not wish to have anything else to do with conventional medicine in my own body the rest of this life.
Well, that's a very strong statement.
Yep, I gave up my supplementary insurance in last December because I just don't want to go there.
Wow. Now, do you feel that we've uncovered in the alternative media a lot of nefarious agendas behind this COVID, which we can make 10 the shows just with that topic alone. Now, we realize it keeps people indoors. It keeps people less socialized, there's less communication. Like I mentioned many times over the air, a lot of the signs say, walk with your eyes down, don't have eye contact with people, stay indoors, don't communicate. You know, it's pretty obvious what they're trying to pull here. But regarding getting sun and vitamin D, can you tell our listeners how important that is for your immune system?
Well, it's the top of my list. The average person, adult, who weighs 139 pounds or less should take 50,000 units of vitamin D3 every 10 days. The average person who weighs more than 140 pounds, 140 or more, should take it once a week. That's how simple it is.
Now, when you say people to go out and get vitamins, you know, with all this talk, with everything being synthesized, with all these, so many drugs coming from China and other questionable manufacturers, where do you recommend people going to get quality, efficacious products regarding vitamins?
So my website is where I get everything, and I think what I've got on my website, as far as I can tell, is both efficacious and safe.
Very good. Very good. Well, folks, we'll be back with Dr. Norm Shealy after the break. We really appreciate you being here. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show, everybody. We really appreciate you being here. This is Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli, and I am with Dr. Norm Shealy. And Dr. Shealy, I apologize for giving you so many questions back to back to back like this, but Vince Finelli threatened me that if I had 10 seconds of dead air, he's going to make me sing 1970s disco songs. So I got to be careful. And if you ever heard me sing, well, I don't know if you're a hunter, but if you've ever heard a wounded moose stuck in the mud, you'll get an idea of what I sound like. So I got to make sure I keep going with these questions here. So thanks for dealing with that. Dr. Shealy, I try to, there's all this information about gut health. Is there any, and you see ads all over the place about, healthy vegetables that are immune stimulants. Are there any vegetables that you would recommend, especially if they've been radiated or they're so filled with chemicals and just drugs? Are there vegetables that you would not recommend eating out there today?
Well, I personally don't buy anything at a grocery store, so I don't know. I don't trust anything at a grocery store, and I particularly wouldn't pay you 2 cents extra for anything labeled organic because it's got to at least have Roundup on it out of the rain. So I don't know how to recommend how to buy in a grocery store because I don't trust any of it.
Well, I'll tell you, the word organic should be in quotes, should have be italicized, and should have many asterisks by it because on this show, I know we have divulged quite a few organic companies who have been caught not being organic. Now,
well, that's right. But again, it is unethical, in my opinion, if you know that 75% of the rain that's fallen on that vegetable has Roundup in it to call it organic. How can it be organic if it's got Roundup in it?
Well, not just Roundup, any chemical. Absolutely.
Well, but especially Roundup.
Yeah. Well, when you've been reading about the CDC, the NIH,
well, they're part of the evil empire. I wouldn't trust them to tell me the time of day.
I agree, and I think a lot of people are waking up to this. The NIH has been caught doing some nefarious things with China. I've mentioned those things on the air many times, but I'm going to try and keep to medical information for our listeners because we're running out of time here and we're less than half an hour to the end of the show. Dr. Shealy, Shealy, I harvest in the woods here in the North Country in northwest Montana. I harvest chaga. I'm sure you're familiar with the dry mushroom chaga. It has almost every benefit and vitamin in the book. And I'll drink a chaga tea, probably 3-4 times a week. Throw a little honey in there, mostly during the winter months. And I also fast maybe a couple days a month, and I'll take a couple shots here and there of apple cider vinegar. I don't do anything with a real disciplined regimen on those things, but I do those three things. What are your opinions on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, what's your opinion on taking chaga, fasting, and apple cider vinegar?
Well, I'm not a faster. I get hungry after 12 hours, and I don't enjoy it, therefore, and I don't need to. But if you like to fast, if it's something you enjoy and feel good about, go for it. As far as chaga is concerned, yes, I would do it if I could find them, but I don't go in the woods to find them, and I wouldn't know how to shop for them, so to speak. Apple cider vinegar, yes.
And what dosage, if you will, or how much would you recommend?
2 tablespoons a day is adequate.
Okay. So regarding fasting, you say you don't do it, and you certainly can't argue with the success you've had in life, physical, mental, and activity-wise. But I've read that fasting can almost like reset your immune system and help your gut bacteria reset. What's your? Do you think there's some validity to that?
Yes, for some people it works well. Again, you have to have a fasting personality, in my opinion.
Now, I have a question. I've always wondered about this, especially in this disinformation world that we live in today. Is there, in your opinion, can you discuss the benefits or detriments of bacteria and viruses living in cold climates versus warm climates? You have an opinion on that, Dr. Shealy?
I don't know enough about the differences in the climate to make a judgment. I'm sure there are differences, but I have not actually studied that particular thing.
Mm-hmm. We've talked about vaccines. We've talked about COVID. And to me, it's amazing. In your 64 years of medicine, Dr. Shealy, have you ever seen this much attention given to a virus or a bacteria
that
has a mortality rate of 99 point something %, depending on comorbidities and age?
Well, first of all, again, I consider that well, yes. The actual death rate is less than 10%.
So the actual, can you repeat that, please?
About a month ago, the CDC actually admitted once that the actual death rate from the virus was slightly less than 10%. In other words, 90+% of all the people dying had severe comorbidities, which was really the major cause of death.
Oh, right. Okay. I just wanted to make sure the context was understood. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I remember just a few weeks ago, they said that they knocked down their mortality rates down to like 6% of the number they came out with because of all the false information. And I'm sure you heard about the president of Tanzania swabbing a goat and a papaya. And I'm not making this up, by the way. And tests coming out as a positive test for COVID. I mean, it's really difficult. I mean, you've made it very clear on your opinion of how corrupt the system has gone. But if you're a layperson reading this stuff and seeing the propaganda and the lies and the agendas that they're funneling us to because they're using this COVID tyranny. I mean, how do you, young people are either going to give up totally or just start doing all the reading and research on their own. I mean, how do you recommend young people in this age of corruption moving forward in medicine, Dr. Shealy?
Well, I think they should subscribe to my email newsletter. I talk about it all the time.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a pretty good plan. It's really quite disturbing, some of the things that's going on here. In fact, there's an article out here that it was a whistleblower from Canada basically talking about how these lockdowns, they're planning on new lockdowns around the world, including Canada, where they're going to talk about debt resets, forced vaccinations, internment camps. It's amazing to me, despite all the information that's out there, Dr. Shealy, how the powers that be are still moving forward with this kind of totalitarian, tyrannical, communist insurrection agenda.
I agree.
So, regarding overall health, for people, you know, I try to stay away from financial, economic stuff when I have you on, Doctor, because of all your great experience, but I'm going to kind of go into a little gray area here. Let's say you're in the bottom 93% of income earners, and you say, well, I can't afford that 20 to 40 acres in order to start my garden, raise a few animals, harvest timber for heat, et cetera, basically more of a self-sufficiency lifestyle. Do you have any advice to people like that on maybe combining capital resources and skill sets and getting together with other people? What do you have a database on your website where you can get like-minded people together and actually create a commerce situation to improve their life?
No, I do not, because that would require a lot of talent, of time that I do not have. Somebody has to organize that. But I think that, actually 10 people could get together and buy 1 acre for their crop. They, on 1 acre you could raise enough food for vegetables and stuff for 10 people, 10 families.
Do you have, just regarding overall health, longevity, do you have any homemade remedies that you recommend for certain illnesses?
Well, to me, the number one way to avoid illness is to detach from everything that worries you. And the way to do that is something called autogenic training. I have used that since 1972. I give it away free to people who go to my website and sign up for it. It's called Autogenic Focus on my website, but you can sign up for my newsletter and get a free download of it. And if you will practice that 18 minutes twice a day for 3 months, it will improve your life for the rest of your life. After 3 months, you can do it in 1 or 2 minutes.
And can you kind of give a brief layperson explanation of what you mean?
Yes. You repeat after me the phrases. I do it very slowly. My arms and legs are heavy and warm. In and out. My heartbeat is calm and regular. My breathing is free and easy. My abdomen is warm. My forehead is cool. My mind is quiet and still. Each of those phrases you repeat 18 to 20 times.
So would you consider this to be some type of meditation?
Of course. I call it self-regulation, but it is a meditative experience.
Okay. Well, we'll be back with Dr. Shealy after this break for our last segment of the morning. Welcome back, folks. Last segment of the morning. I'm with Dr. Norm Shealy. And Dr. Shealy, I really am honored to be able to interview you with all your accomplishments in your life. And I really appreciate what you're doing for the people. You are a great example of a true American. Now, when you were talking about your meditation therapy, are there objective ratings or facts on personal recommendations of this therapy, validations? I can see how that could help relax you, give you better sleep. What kind of objective results would something like that offer, or is there any?
Well, there are 28,000 scientific articles on autogenic training, including my doctoral dissertation in psychology, which was based upon it.
Interesting. And from your experience, how often have you recommended this therapy in your practice over the years?
Well, I've offered to all my patients for at least the last 48 years, and on my radio show every week, et cetera. So probably a few 100,000 people.
Wow. So how, as far as results from the feedback you've received, if you had to shoot from the hip and guess how many people, percentage-wise, as a rate, this idea, the solution of meditation has helped them positively, what number would you slap on that?
85%.
Wow. Wow.
But I can't do it for you.
Right.
I could give it to you, but I can't substitute the doing of it for you.
Right. So basically, in the beginning, you're basically reading a piece of paper because, it takes a while to memorize all the things you have to say. Is that fair?
Well, I give people the recording. It used to be a CD. Now I give it, in fact, once upon a time it was actually an old cassette tape, but now it's an MP3.
So would you recommend listening to this by your bedside before you go to sleep?
And before you, and I recommend the ideal time is as you wake up in the morning and as you go to sleep in the evening.
Interesting. Okay. My next question, Dr. Shealy, is a lot of people, because of the lack of trust in the system, the GMO foods, the Monsantos of the world, all the chemicals, all the things that we talk about, the fluoride, everything, all of it. There's so much ambiguity regarding trust. When someone gets cancer today, I'm a firm believer that if you had everything x-rayed, every CAT scan, every MRI, every blood test, if you're basically above 30, you're probably going to detect some type of cancer. That's a paranoid hypochondriac who would do something like that. But when you do get diagnosed with cancer these days, we all know that chemotherapy is basically a derivative of a mustard gas. What's your opinion of taking chemotherapy versus natural remedies to fight cancer? And under the category of natural remedies, what would you recommend?
Okay, there's no chemotherapy for which I would allow in my body. Not one. My treatment is intravenous vitamin C, 50 to 100 grams, 20 times, and intravenous ozone. We do it here at the clinic regularly.
I've read articles where SWAT teams were literally coming in and arresting people who are doing intravenous vitamin C because the powers that be do not want that to be available. So you're saying that as a physician, you can prescribe intravenous vitamin C. Does that have to be given by a diagnostician? Let's say someone like me in Montana is diagnosed with cancer, or some type of immune system disorder, and I want to get vitamin C intravenously. How would I go about that, especially if some of these physicians today are bought and paid for to hold the narrative to sell these synthetic pharmaceutical drugs, which, as you told, and I knew, is controlled by Big Pharma, the whole industry. How would some average Joe do that?
You go only to a holistic physician. If they don't advertise being a holistic physician, they are not.
So would that be like a natural path?
No, that's not. It has to be an MD.
Has to be an MD. So is it possible for somebody to hire a home nurse and
No.
Okay.
Not without a physician prescription.
Okay. Dr. Shealy, it's amazing how time flies so fast when I interview you. And again, thank you for everything that you do for the American people. I know we all appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow, folks. I'll be on the air with Vince tomorrow. Dr. Shealy, thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.